Well, hey, welcome to the Integrated Man podcast. So glad to have you with us on this episode today. If you want more information about the Integrated Man, you can go to theintegratedman.life. It gives you all the details on who we are, what we do, what our ministry is all about. But I'm excited about today's podcast. I want to jump right in. We've got a guest with us today in the house, Kevin Polky. Kevin's been a friend of mine for years. Met him actually through my wife and her working with him and at his location. And just excited about our friendship and about having him on the podcast today. Kevin's just a wealth of knowledge of just men's life, mental health, wellness in general. Kevin, you've got a practice called Four Corners Wellness, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And I'm not gonna. I always give a horrible explanation of who people are and what they do, so I let them take care of that. So, Kevin, for those here who don't know your story, kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, and then kind of what got you into the work that you're doing today.
Okay. Grew up, had the good fortune of having an intact family my entire life. You know, Dad was a blue collar worker, maintenance electrician. Wouldn't be an uncommon week that he worked 60 hours a week, 6 days a week typically, sometimes Sunday. That was a very common thing. Could fix anything. Right. Back when he was in high school, All-State, went and played for Iowa State, and all that. And that was a big part of his presence. My mom was a stay-at-home mom until we got old enough, and then she worked in the schools. And so I never didn't have, I wasn't like that latchkey. My brother and I weren't latchkey. We would, Mom was there when we left, and she was there when we got home.
Okay, that's nice.
Yeah, and then early on, sports, reading about sports heroes and reading about, Indians and Indian hero, that all had a huge part of my formation during that time period. And similar, being raised in a Lutheran church, always going to church every Sunday and through Lent and Advent, and just remember that was a big impression. And for me, that idea of Jesus and the stories about Jesus were very personal even before I knew anything about a personal relationship aspect. So I was fortunate in that background. But sports then really became a driving force in my life. Late grade school, definitely in middle school, started lifting weights for sports in seventh grade, and that was a significant awakening. We didn't have sports in sixth grade in this middle school, and really concerned about not being able to play in the seventh and eighth grade football team.
Sure.
Didn't know that I happened to also grow about 5 inches that summer.
Lucky you! I didn't hit mine until like 10th grade. So
I started in the back row, and then by the time I was a senior, I was in the front row because I never grew again. But what happened was this perception was that I was not husky. But not slim, if you remember the jeans and how they divided up, and lined up with the linemen until we got to the sprints, and they told us to run as fast as we could, and I did, and I finished first, and then we ran back and finished first again, and then I was a running back, and so starting on offense and defense as a seventh grader in a seventh and eighth grade football team. Middle school kids, right? You become popular with boys, and if you're popular with boys, and soon you become popular with girls.
Right.
Had no idea, no clue what had happened, because 3 months earlier I was a sixth grader, and it felt like nobody knew who I was.
Yeah, wow.
And now all of a sudden, all I know is I didn't want it to end. So I figured it had something to do with lifting weights and something to do with sports.
Okay.
And then a few years later, it was bodybuilding, and started competing as a bodybuilder when I was 15. Continued to play football and wrestle, but bodybuilding was my new passion. And good fortune to be around some guys at Champions Gym when there were some top bodybuilders in the country here. 10 years older than me or so, and trained with them. you're training with guys that are 10 years older when you're a teenager is a huge advantage.
Yeah.
And so started competing when I was 15, like I said, won the Teenage Illinois at 17, Mr. USA at 18, ranked number 1 at 19.
Yeah.
And that was my journey until, thank goodness, all the way through college, stayed in school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got a degree in psychology, but it was really more directed towards sports psychology.
Okay.
Because I didn't know a counselor. Didn't even know what a counselor did. Mm-hmm. And bodybuilding ended, and that's a whole nother story. Sometime we may get into it, but but that led me because my identity was wrapped up in it. Okay. I was I couldn't differentiate between who is Kevin Polky and this identity that I created through a competitive athlete. Wow. And when that come to an end, crash and halt, I was lost. We refer to it, John of the Cross refers to it as the dark night of the soul. And I was in that, angry, lost, directionless, felt betrayed by the church that I attended at the time, lots of that stuff. Yeah. And but I had worked as a juvenile correctional officer, had a personal training business when I was in between jobs, and then started working at a psychiatric hospital. And that led me to social work. Went back to school at U of I, down at University of Illinois down in Champaign, and got a master's in social work. Never thought I wanted to do it, but I ended up specializing in school social work, which led me back to Harlem, where I graduated from, and was a football coach and strength coach and a school social worker there. When my son was born, a couple of years later, after Diane and I got married, we made an agreement that she supported me emotionally and psychologically through me going to graduate school, so it was going to be her turn.
Right.
Never thought she'd want to stay home. She never thought she wanted to stay home, but once he came, she didn't want to go.
Everything changed, yeah.
She was making about 60% of our family income. Okay. So I scrambled, and so working during the day, coached in the afternoon. And then at night I started working for a psychiatrist doing clinical practice. Okay. And then fast forward, started KP counseling in 2001. 2010 is when I met Crystal, because I started Four Corners Wellness Center at that time. Had to reformat it a few years later to expand KP. Sold KP in 15 to me and a couple partners created an interstate company, and eventually that got bought in 2017. They turned that into a national company called Refresh Mental Health, and I was part of that until 2 years ago, until 2024. And I decided that I needed to get back into counseling and back to Rockford, because I was traveling. I had 17 locations in Wisconsin I was responsible for, and 11 in Illinois. That's a lot. And I wanted to get back to Rockford. So now I'm Four Corners Wellness Center is what we do. We're starting a fitness component to the Wellness Center in July 1st. All right. And then but we do counseling, consulting, coaching, and then workshops and seminars. And then my nonprofit, Shed Our Silence. This is our 10th year doing that. And that is a suicide prevention program. Came out of 2014's graduating class, lost 3 of their students out of 100 to suicide in 3 years. And so we focus on raising awareness and educating individuals on the warning signs, the factors that lead to young adult suicide. And so we educate young adults, anybody really, but the significant others, and then professionals that work with them.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so
that's great, man. I definitely want to dig into some of that. You know, talking about Shed Our Silence, because it's just an issue that impacts so many men, and specifically. But I do want to jump back to this transition to 6th, 7th, 8th grade, right? Because I know there are a lot of men who have experienced that in life. And that, I don't know what caused this change, but I know that I feel like this is where my identity becomes forged. So, and men kind of get lost with it. They hit that dark night of the soul, like you said, and they go, I don't know who I am apart from what I do. So many men wrestle with that. I can't tell you how many men I've asked the question, what would you do if you had a day all to yourself? And they don't know. Like, I don't, you know, or like, what do you want to do with your time? They're so wrapped up in either their responsibility, you know, what they have to do, or what people expect of them type of thing, or who they think they are, that they really don't take the time to do that deep work to figure out who they are inside. So what about that? Like, how did you go through that journey of deep work inside yourself to go, okay, who is Kevin apart from the bodybuilder, the football player, you know, that type of thing? What were some of the steps that you took in that journey?
Well, I think, you know, I think on one hand, you know, the bodybuilding, it was one of those things that goes back to early on reading about people who had made right. They had books written about them, stories told about them, right? And I remember in middle school going, okay, I'm good at track, but I don't think I'm going to win state. I'm good at wrestling, but I don't know if I'm good enough. Right. You know, I'm good at football, but I don't know if I'm college. I'm definitely not pro material. Mm-hmm. Bodybuilding, I think I can be in that 1%. I think I can, you know, that type of thing. Yeah. And this is like a 15-year-old thinking, right? So
sure,
we're not talking like a lot of, you know, maturity in this, but right. Yeah. And but I was willing to put in the work, and I was willing to listen and grow. And so I think it was about, it became my identity, but originally, and I didn't know this at the time, it was only later after doing the work, but it was about how to be visible and avoid being invisible. Okay. I didn't have that language in my teen years or even early 20s, but that was probably the core of it. I knew what it was like to be invisible, 6 and earlier, and then all of a sudden now I'm visible. Right. And then this is how I believed was the secret sauce. Outwork people, outdiscipline people, self-sacrifice, those types of things. Yeah. But it became a very self-focused type of world. Everything else was secondary. And, you know, and I could rationalize, okay, it was just, it was focus on church, focus on working out, focus on, you know, work or whatever it was. But my world would get really small when I'd start getting ready for a show. And so when that came to an end, the way it came to an end was the only, now looking at it, it had to happen that way or I would have never left. I would have kept going because I was too attached to it. And so, so that was not at the time, it sucked at the time, but later I realized it was a good thing because then it forced me to recreate myself. And then the counseling world, the helping world, helping others was really that. And then it became, you know, also this whole, it wasn't an education piece. The education allowed me to do the job, but learning how to listen, connect, help, words I didn't even know, empathy, you know, these things were all, was then a spiritual thing. Yeah. And so that helped form me as well from that end. But even with that being said, I remember a time period in the, you know, 2012, 2010, you know, 2014, where I had that very familiar feeling of not being able to differentiate between Kevin Polky and KP counseling. They were enmeshed again. Yeah. Words that I would use were such as have to, I can't, always. These are the words that I know that when they come out of my mouth, I'm getting enmeshed again. Sure. My identity is getting wrapped up in it again. And so those are what I learned over time are my telltale signs because I'm, you know, on the Enneagram, I very much identify with being the achiever. Like it doesn't take me a lot of energy to do those things. Right. But it does take me energy to find balance, to, to be okay with not going full throttle all the time.
Right.
Or of differentiating between, just because it's a door, an opportunity. Now I have to go through an exercise. God, do you want me to go through this door, or do you want me to keep the door closed?
Right.
Before, I just thought, well, God must have provided this door for me. I must have to go through it.
Yeah.
And so these are all things that I have had to continue learning about myself. And really that conscious contact with God
Sure.
is really the part that I got to come back to ground me in it. And I think, again, this is just, regardless if I'm working with someone who's in recovery with addiction, and then they found AA or 12-step program, we talk about that spiritual program. Even if you don't necessarily have a relationship or an understanding or a willingness to have like an organized religious God is through an organized religion.
Yeah.
The spiritual program of an AA or 12-step is that you have to believe in something greater than yourself, right, so that you know that you're not.
Yeah.
And it's really, that's the essence.
Yeah. So with that, kind of framework, how would you recommend, because I know that you referred to it as enmeshment, right? When we get so caught up in being defined by the things that we do or expectations, and you've got your own ways of like, okay, this is how I pay attention to my language, and I know. What about for somebody who you would counsel? What would you kind of maybe some recommendations that you would give them to go, hey, here's how you can know if you're enmeshed? Are there some telltale signs of that, or is it different for everybody?
Well, I think, the self-talk that we do, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it comes out as well, is going to be different for, each person's going to be maybe different. Maybe it's going to be, oh yeah, I do that too, or that type of thing. But I think, if we look at it from like, when a person or myself get into like black and white thinking, like dualistic thinking, right? That may be an indication that, that's we're getting this imbalance. We're getting this enmeshment. The idea of dualistic thinking, of us versus them, legalism ties into this, nationalism ties into this idea that if you're not on my team, then you're the enemy. You're them. And, and that, I think, whether, you're stunting your development when that happens, right? You're confirming only the bias that you have when you're looking at that piece of it. And so I'll be working, as we're working with someone, or talking with someone, that'll be, what's their language to describe what they're experiencing on a daily, weekly basis. And then we just challenging it more from a standpoint of helping them look at it, not me challenging it as if I'm right and they're wrong. Right. But you told me when we first started, this is who you want to be. Is this aligning with who you say you want to be? And then sometimes, they come in and they're so lost, like I was. I didn't know who I wanted to be. I just knew what I couldn't be anymore. Right. And so then it's a discovery process of what that is, of trying to listen, and again, I go back to the spiritual piece, is that, there's a tradition in Lakota. Lakota would do, when a boy became of age, he was prepared through a handful of different ceremonies to then do a vision quest. And the vision quest was really this time period where they would fast for up to 4 days by themselves on the hill, and really crying out or praying for God to give them direction of what was their life purpose. And so that was part of my journey. Bodybuilding was what I did for a time period, but it wasn't what I was supposed to do. Counseling is what I'm teaching, right? living, modeling that is what I believe that I've been asked to do.
Yeah.
And that's what my purpose is. And it has different forms of it, but it came through asking the question.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that about the Lakota. I've had probably every other year I'll take a trip by myself into the woods.
Yeah.
Just for clarity. But the majority of men that I talk to, that they don't even have a file drawer for going and doing that by themselves.
Right.
And it's really cool to hear that, because that's encouragement because I'm like, how do you know who you are if you're never alone with yourself? Because we do get so caught up in the day to day that you really don't have time to process. If you don't make time, you're not, it's not going to make itself. There's no shortage of either demands on your time or things grabbing for your attention, whether it's your phone, whether it's the traffic, whether, anything. It could be anything. So I think that's such a valuable tool for men to put in their toolbox, is like, start with 2 days. You don't have to go forward. Start with 24 hours, and maybe not even run away, just go in your backyard and set up a tent or something like that. But I think that can be immensely valuable for men. What are some of the top, so I know you were saying you just got off a recent men's workshop. What were some of the key topics that you kind of worked into and discussed in that workshop?
So it was an interesting thing. Christina Warden came up with this idea that she wanted to do a 4-hour workshop on men's psychology and women's psychology, and she was calling it the battle of the sexes. It's not really a battle. Yeah. And so she asked me to talk about the men's psychology part, and so as I was reflecting on that, I started doing men's work, as they would call it, 35 years ago. And that was when what is referred to as the mythopoetic men's movement. Coming out of the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, Robert Bly and Sam Keen were a couple of the individuals that were involved with that. Bly and Keen were the main ones that influenced me through men's conferences and their writings, such as Iron John and Fire in the Belly. And so in my talk last week, as I really went back and talked about the origin of men's psychology, starting with the mythopoetic men's movement. And then later there was some Christian organization, Promise Keepers and Men's Fraternity, and there was a couple other ones like that. And but one of the things about the men's mythopoetic movement was that it really looked at influences from Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey, Carl Jung, and his regarding archetypes, and then later Robert Moore, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and really tying this in idea of masculine energy and feminine energy, and this idea of how is our role as men in society and in roles have changed since the Industrial Revolution, and how women's roles have changed significantly since World War II, and in the 60s and 70s when women being able to be equally seen in certain roles that never were before. And so and Bly refers to this idea of an uninitiated male being a soft male. And soft male doesn't necessarily refer to as passive. It could be, but it's more of this idea of undeveloped. It could be aggressive. It could be angry all the time. It could be self-centered. Like when I was bodybuilding, I didn't on the exterior look or sound like a soft male.
Right.
But what really was going on was that it was an undeveloped male who had no idea of the male mode of feeling, and didn't have a code in which to live by.
Okay.
And so that was really for me what guided me, and then also helped me take some of these ideas and principles from Christian spirituality and give it a way of applying it in my life, you know, and not just behaviorally, but then also mentally, emotionally as well. Yeah. And so we talked about that last week and kind of set that foundation regarding that, introduced that idea of initiation, kind of like what I was just talking about regarding the Lakota, that we don't really have in Western society. We don't really have formalized initiation.
How do you know when you are a man?
Right.
When you become a man.
Yeah. And I think it has also, it used to be for women that it was when, you know, the differentiating between girls and a woman was their menses. And now, unfortunately, for a variety of different reasons, that's way over my head. Right. You know, we got girls that are having their first menses in the grade school. Well, we know that there's no way that they could be considered a woman at that point, where generationally, you know, common, you know, menses would start at, you know, 13, 14, 15. Right. Okay. Now, I mean, even though it would, you know, still we got some more developing to do. Sure. But it's a lot more than a fourth or fifth grader. Right. Right. Yeah. And then with boys, there was really nothing if it isn't formalized. Right. Hence why we have street gangs, initiating fraternities, different clubs, different things like that. And why hazing, that type of initiation, has gravitated, and people are willing to, because they want to be part of something, something bigger than themselves.
Yeah, kind of an unhealthy way to try and express a healthy thing. You know, that the hazing or the initiation. And I think the initiation into manhood, that's something that can only be bestowed by a man into the life of another man. Now, there's components of it that the female takes in that as well, but when it comes to like saying, okay, this is it, you're now a man and you have manly responsibilities and these are the expectations of a man, a lot of that, I think, is another big problem among masculine society, is fatherlessness. You know, and that's when you have nobody to really tell you, whether your father's there or not. He can be an absent, you know, but present physically. But I feel like that's another big issue that men face today, is we never have somebody there to go, hey, this is what it looks like to be a man. These are men's responsibilities. And now you're at the place where I can, you know, knight you, so to speak, and congratulations, you're ready to enter into manhood. That's something that's hugely missing in our society.
Well, and I don't want us to make sure we don't skip over this point. You know, generationally, you know, the idea that only a man can bring a boy from boyhood into manhood is historically, that's what has always been. And similar with women, right? Can bring a girl over into being a woman. Another key component to that is that the man who brings you over that threshold from boyhood to manhood can't be your father. Cannot be your father.
Okay.
Your father is the one who models it for you, shows you, and then invites elders, other men, into the boy's life. Yeah. And then when the boy then comes over that threshold, over that chasm, he brings that back to his father, right? So that they can then, because if not, the father is going to have energy around wanting to protect him. He can't, with integrity, he can't bring him across because there's going to be too much of that energy around protecting him. But I can bring your son over, right, and you could bring my son over, because there's a way of we know what the path is, and we're not distracted by the safety, right, or the agenda of my identity be wrapped up if he crosses over. So if I'm bringing someone else over, I don't got nothing tied to it.
Right.
But if it's mine, we got investment here.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of makes you more impartial to the judgment of, is he really ready to cross over? And if he's my son, I'm anxious for him to be a man, and it's time. And I think, no matter what, let's do it. But if I'm judging kind of judging based on somebody else's capability and timing, I have no timeline, because I want to do what's best for him, not necessarily what's best for me or for the father, as the father being like, well, that's my son. It's time for him, because we want to celebrate, and I want to be proud of him, and I want to build his esteem, and I want to, all the things that a father should want to do in a healthy way. But I can see that really makes sense. Yeah.
So it's critically important that the father's there, or the uncles are there, or whatever, there to prepare for it, for placing that longing, for wanting to do it, because the boys seeing their dad doing it, so they are planting the seeds to want that they're wanting to cross over, right? It's critically important that the father is able to then let go and release him to another man who will then bring that over, or a group of men who will bring that over. And I think, kind of going back to what, if my father never had it modeled for him,
right,
then I don't know what to necessarily do. And if I happen to be with a strong woman, which I'm probably drawn to, right, then and she's going to have some strong feelings about her child, right? I may take a passive role,
right,
and so then I may be in a situation where I don't know what to do, and I'm reacting out of things, or I'm overcompensating for things. That's why you hear about men going silent, because this idea, John Eldridge talked about it in Wild at Heart, is that the key. And again, these are all stories and metaphors, but the key question that he says that burns in a man's heart is, do I have what it takes? Right? And you can say in many different platforms, we ask that question in different ways. And so I think some of these things that have been going, stuff that's been on for hundreds and hundreds of years that we've known and observed with men, and they've been studied, are still true today, in spite of all the advances in technology and all that. We're still the same.
Yeah. So why do you think, or do you think, there's a massive gap in that in our society today? Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we initiating our young men? Why? I guess it's not as easy as snapping your fingers and saying, everybody can do this, fill out this 3-step plan, and it happens. But why do you think there's such or do you think there's such a gap in male initiation today?
Well, I don't necessarily, I definitely think it is in male initiation, and has been for more than a long time. I think all the great things about the Industrial Revolution at the late 1800s, early 1900s, but that was part of the appearing to not be necessary anymore, because we were no longer an agricultural or hunter-gatherers. And so the roles were jobs that were then assigned by someone that the family never met. And the father would be leaving the homes. And so I think the necessity that was when we were, a small community, of settlers, a small community of farmers, small community in a tribe or a clan. It was necessary that we had very defined roles, and you needed to know how to operate in those defined roles. And so there was a preparation that had to happen out of survival. where, I think today, from a standpoint of physical survival, maybe it isn't necessary, but I think emotionally and spiritually it still is.
Okay.
Where we still have things, girls in the Mexican culture have quinceañeras. We in the Christian, in some mainstream Christian, have confirmation. But it doesn't necessarily tie it into like manhood, from boyhood to manhood. But
Right.
those are initiations, but it's not necessarily tied in other areas. It's taught about one thing, but instead of all inclusive.
Right.
And so, I mean, those are just my guesses
Yeah.
about why, why has it changed? And, but we can see why emotionally and psychologically and spiritually, we still need those things.
Right.
We just don't necessarily, we unconsciously gravitate it toward this group of individuals who will accept me. If I'm not accepted by the athletes, and I want to be an athlete, but this group does accept me, I become part of them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think even vocationally, as a country, and I'm speaking of the United States, but we've drifted away from this mentorship. Except for in the trades, there are very few places where you come in and you're an apprentice for a very long time until you get to be, until you move to the next step and then become a journeyman and teach others and then kind of move on. But there are very few places now. It's kind of, you get out of high school, you go to college, you learn your thing, and then you kind of get thrust into a job and are kind of expected to, I don't know, on the job training, figure it out type of thing. There's really not that structure in place for like, okay, I have somebody to look up to for this, and it's just naturally ingrained in us. Whereas now it's kind of like, well, we just go to the experts for all the teaching. And, who's your mentor in real life? Well, I don't have a real life mentor. I have this guy on social media and this guy whose books I read and this guy, where I feel like that is somewhat detrimental. But going back to the actual initiation, it's just something we have to really be intentional with. Have to put a lot of intention towards it in the lives of men and initiating young men into men. Yeah. So
I was listening to an interview recently that talked about the idea of, and after they were saying it, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess this is, and I think it's another concern because we have such access to information, and you can do online courses, and you can do self-help courses and get the certification and those type of things. And you don't ever have to leave your house. Right. And you never necessarily have to meet anybody in person, regarding this piece. Again, that may very well, I mean, you can go through that process and be self-taught, but is that actually bringing you over that place? Do I really know I have what it takes when it comes to the interacting aspect of it, right? And so I think, school, universities after the pandemic, online learning is an option at almost every university now. And in some are exclusive. Yeah. And so I think those are some risks of some of that aspect of, I can do this without somebody. And I think there's aspects of development that may not happen, as a risk of that.
Yeah. There's a lot that's missed in not, and I tell the guys this in their physical life as well. Like, you got to put yourself in a situation every now and then where you're afraid to die. Like where you're maybe not afraid to die, but like where your risk of pain is real. If you always live a digital life, then you think a lot more of yourself than you can really accomplish. I'm a chronic overestimator of my ability. So I constantly try to put myself in situations to go, okay, I'm gonna test my salt here. Do I really Go back to that question. Do I really have what it takes? And not let, when the answer comes back, no, not let it crush me, but let it teach me. And so many men today will let it crush them and just curl up into a ball, and they just, can't get out of it or whatever. I don't know. It just becomes a challenge for a lot of men today. But I think that's a valuable thing, is to put yourself in those situations that are real life, to go, okay, don't live a comfortable life all the time. Challenge yourself, move, grow, do things that are out of your comfort zone. And that's part of initiation by life, as a man.
There's a workshop that I do about the 5 steps of developing resilience or developing grit. And I teach this to, from educators to students to manufacturing, wherever it may be. And one of the things I talk about is this idea of choosing to do hard things. And yes, sometimes it is psychologically, or mentally, cognitively stretching me type of thing. But practicing that, because there's a part of our brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, right? Literally part of our brain that neurologists have discovered that when you do hard things, stretch yourself out of your comfort zone, that part actually grows stronger. And when you don't, it doesn't grow and may actually atrophy. So then when life gets hard, you don't have any resource. Right. You have a greater tendency to avoid, greater tendency, to want somebody to rescue you or whatever it may be. Yeah. And so I think this idea of like you said, challenging yourself, finding out, what am I made of regarding this, and I think there is something about doing that from a physical standpoint that will then push us through mentally, and emotionally as well. Going back to the idea of like initiation, I do think there are, like when we think of, the armed forces, right? You think of sports teams, there is these levels of initiation into, maybe instead of manhood, into a brotherhood, into a group that you now identify as a Marine. Yeah. Once a Marine, always a Marine type of idea. And so, and then you have even from there, like special forces and even this more elite or more closer knit of brotherhood. And so I think there are those things. Yep. But I think also sometimes there is this, we're not looking at developing the whole person, not always looking at developing the whole person. Yeah. It may be more from a certain aspect regarding a function or whatever it is. So I think, when we think of those different aspects that happen, it's that longing for identity, a longing for a sense of purpose. Where do I fit in? This idea of, do I have what it takes, are all questions I think, we as men wrestle with. Yeah. That's not to say women don't. They do very much in their own way. Yeah. Today, to be a woman in 2026, is to be a professional, have a career, to be a mom, to do both at the same time. Yeah. These are tough things for women to wrestle with, and then to do it with a partner. There's many things to navigate. So I would definitely say today is not a day that you can just phone it in.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to talk a little bit, kind of get into a little bit more about identity and purpose. But I also want to talk about what you do with Shatter Our Silence, because I think the two could be really interrelated, with men struggling with identity and purpose, and then the rate of male suicide being so high. So, I correct me if I'm wrong. You're probably more savvy on the stats than I am, but men account for a majority of suicide. Why do you think that so many men suffer in silence?
Well, I think it's a combination. It always is a combination of things.
There's
right?
not a rubber stamp of like,
But I do, so I think of this idea that we all exist, this came out of the work over the last 10 years, that we all exist on a continuum. And this metaphor of living on a continuum of, to the left is the brightest of bright lights, representing love, hope, and joy. And to the right is a complete eclipse of any light at all. And there in the darkness is hopelessness, despair, and the darkness then lies to the person and says that it's always going to be this way. It'll never change. You are the exception to the rule. The med's not going to work for you. You tried counseling before.
Yeah.
And it wants them to succumb to the darkness, right? Yeah. Life isn't about being to the far left. It's to experience that, savor it, but it isn't the ultimate goal to live there.
Right.
Because vacation all the time
gets boring.
It's no longer a vacation because you live there.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Yeah.
It just doesn't exist, right?
Yeah,
so
that's good.
Life is about moving up and down the continuum,
Yeah.
right? And so when we're over here, being aware of the darkness, metaphorically, is lying to us through our own thoughts and through our weakest links. And so if a man is struggling with the sense of early traumas in his life, failures in his life, not having that person to be there to help pick him up when he has fallen,
right.
A loneliness, a sense of here we go again, or that they have maybe, like in my case, built myself up onto this false pedestal, hearing what people were saying, affirming,
right.
And then the pedestal comes crashing down, and having no sense of how to rebuild, and so some individuals, if they don't have, like for me at that time period, I was angry and I was lost and I didn't know I could even reach out. I mean, of course, there's people that said stuff, but I didn't even know that's what I really could do. I had not experienced it. I had not witnessed it. And so I think there's one that sometimes men will suffer in silence because they don't know they can ask for help. I think it's better today than it's ever been regarding that. And then it's a matter of who and where is to do that. And it takes so much courage when you're in your most vulnerable space to ask for help, to reach out. And so I think that's one. I think maybe it could be, some men have had bad experiences when they have reached out, or they have felt like they moved on this end of the continuum and then something happens and they end up going back for a variety of different reasons. And it's like, I'm cursed. All this negative narrative, right? This life-taking narrative could be some of the reasons why, what's the point? No one's going to understand. Because the darkness says no one's going to understand.
Right.
Your situation is unique. Your situation is, Corey says he will understand, but he don't know this.
Right. Yeah.
He hasn't seen this one.
Right.
That type of stuff. And so, and again, when we are in that most vulnerable place, we feel weak, we don't know, and we may cover that up with anger, but we're really afraid. And then Robert Bly will talk about that most men silently suffer in this deep, deep grief. And some of us don't even know what we're grieving of. They could be grieving, he would say, it could be grieving that we're not in the woods anymore, grieving that of the animals that were lost in the woods, or all these things that go deeper into the collective unconscious, or it could be more from a standpoint of the father that wasn't, or the mother that wasn't able to, of that type of grief, or the missed opportunity because it's the opportunity I didn't take.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, what are some of if you know, if I know of somebody that may be struggling, or maybe I don't, maybe I see that everything with the people around me is all fine and dandy. What are maybe some of the warning signs that I could look for or be aware of in the people that are in my realm that could be just something that's like, hey, this is a red flag with this person, something that I may need to, gently and in a safe way as a friend or a brother or whatever, dive into? What are some of those warning signs that people put off, or are there any?
Well, there definitely are, and but before we jump into the warning signs, I think it's critically important if I want to be in that place that I can help if help is needed.
Yes,
it's first got to start with me taking care of me,
right?
And I we say it all the time, but I stress it so much because I'm not going to be able to take care of somebody professionally or personally if Kevin's in the way because of something's going on with Kevin. Either my ambition or my greed or my whatever.
Savior complex or whatever. Yeah.
Whatever it may be. And I got to be grounded in that. I have to get enough sleep. I got to be taking care of myself physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So let's say we're doing that.
Yeah.
Right. And we're at least cognizant of moving in that direction. So then, what are some signs to look for? Well, I mean, obviously the big signs, the most immediate or urgent signs would be when someone talks about not wanting to be here. They want to talk about, if they use the word suicide, which isn't always used, but they say they're suicidal, they say they don't want to wake up tomorrow, they say you don't want to be here anymore, what's the point of living? Any of those things are immediate. We need to get some immediate help, right? This is beyond now the counseling, the supporting. We have to get some immediate medical attention, possibly with the help of first responders to get us somewhere. When I say that, I should qualify it, right? I can have a client tell me that at this point they're feeling suicidal. Now I'm going to ask them some more questions to find out if they have a plan. What's their intent? Do they have a plan? Do they have a means to a plan? Have they ever attempted before? These are things that are going to, but for the lay person, if a person's saying that, we want to ask those questions about, are really, Corey, you don't want to be here anymore. You never want to see Crystal again. You never want to see your boys again.
Sure.
You don't want to see so-and-so's next birthday.
Right.
And when the person goes, or they pause, then we're going somewhere. If a person's going, no, I'm not talking about dying. I'm talking about, this sucks. I don't know if this is ever going to change.
Right.
Oh, we're talking about hopelessness.
Sure.
Now, hopelessness is on that continuum.
Yeah.
And death ideation is on the continuum, but it doesn't necessarily mean a person has a means or a plan and then the means to take their own life. So those are obviously some signs, but when a person's talking about feeling stuck, not believing things are ever going to change,
right?
These are also warning signs that I need to move in closer,
right?
Not to fix it,
right,
but to know more about what the story is.
Yeah.
Does that make?
Yeah, that's good. And I think you don't want to approach it. Obviously, you don't want to approach it with a bunch of uneducated people trying to jump in and be the savior. So I appreciate the fact that you did say, let's make sure we're handling ourselves first, but then jumping in, and digging in a little deeper. If somebody says that, we want to make sure it's not a flippant thing, but it's also not a harmless thing. It's not an inert thing. When somebody throws something like that out, I think it can be very, we just need to pay attention to the warning signs with people in our lives. So,
and real quick on that one, just to add to it real quick, there's going to be times when we're just metaphorically and literally, we're just going to get called, right? And we may not be in a good place. We just woke up. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, right?
Right.
But we get the call.
Yeah.
You didn't go out looking for it. I'm talking about when you go out looking for it and you're not grounded. Sure. That's what I'm referring to. When we just get asked or told something, right, and we weren't looking for it, it just happens and it's now in our lap. That's about that idea of moving closer and asking more questions. And you don't have to fix it. You don't have to save them. You just need to be there and let them know that they're not alone, and that you'll walk with them to whatever we need to do next.
Yeah. And I feel like it can be a challenge because so many men feel alone. But the nature of the darkness is it kind of pulls you into being alone. So how can you help with that? I don't know. That's I guess the question. How can I help that somebody not feel alone?
Well, I think sometimes a possible way. One is that us having these conversations right now, right? That's one. Two is that, being able to model that for other people. If I'm with somebody that I feel can hold that space, and I can share something, maybe not something way down here, but share something that is a fear or a dream that I may have, that's modeling for that another person, for them to maybe do that. Maybe not at that moment, maybe at another time. And so the more that I model it, the more that I'm inviting other men into also doing it. And then when they do start moving in that direction, be able to hold space for it. And holding space is being present for them is more than any one thing that you're going to ever say. There's no magic words to it. It's about being present and listening.
I definitely think that's valuable. The most valuable thing is just being a safe place for people to come, and like you said, holding space, giving an area, a non-judgmental place for somebody to be able to communicate that, and just be open and honest, and you to be able to help be there, but also help walk with them, not just go in that direction, but walk with them in a positive direction. So I think that's powerful.
And I think the idea, and we all have our own things, right? It's like, it's like inviting another man, to go and do something with you, right? Next month I'm going with my son-in-law and 4 other guys, and we're going on a Boundary Waters trip, right?
Me too.
And so that's I'm looking forward to it on one hand, but I also I recognize that at 57 years old, I have never done this before, and so it's stretching me, and from a standpoint of preparing for it and doing those types of things is part of, for me, to want to hold up my end of the experience, right? But inviting a man to go and do a workout, or going to have a cigar, or go and go to a campfire, go do something, right? Physically, sometimes is a good way of reaching out to someone, and that is the beginning of creating that space.
No, that's so good. I don't want to cut this short, but I know we're kind of running low on time. What would you, kind of last question, what would you tell a man right now who kind of feels stuck or hopeless or kind of is in that spot in life?
I know for me, when I was in that space, how dark it felt. I didn't know I was afraid, but that was really what was driving it. I didn't know at the time, but clearly there was people that were able to and willing to walk with me because they had walked and been there too.
Yeah.
So I guess what I would encourage someone, number one, know that the darkness is not your thoughts. It mimics your voice, but it's not your thoughts. It's the darkness. And know that it's a liar. And know that if you can just get through this darkest moment, that at some point, right, it will break. Now, there's times when we need to just be and rest, and then there's times when we need to move. And if the first person you reach out to doesn't pick up, you keep calling until someone does. If the first counselor doesn't work, the first person you ask to connect with, a mentor, whatever it may be, you go until you go until you find it, because your heart's worth, your voice is worth finding. Yeah,
so good. Kevin, is there if somebody's come across this podcast and that's something that they're struggling with, is there a suicide hotline that they can call, or what would that?
Yeah, the most immediate thing to do in the imminent aspect of that is 988.
Okay.
So 988 is the suicide hotline, and so you can call that, and there's people to just talk to, or if you know someone, if you're struggling with trying to help someone who's struggling, right, you can call 988, and they will also give you some guidance. Okay. If you're at a point where, I mean, we're at the most darkest place, right? You're in that dark place. You have a plan. You have a means. 988, obviously 911. This we never want. We say it, and it's almost like a cliche, but I believe there's truth to it. We don't ever want to use a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Correct. Yeah.
I don't know how long temporary is. And temporary may be a while. Yeah. But I do know at some point that sun will break the darkness. Yep. And I don't know how much work we have to do to get there, but I do believe it with the deepest part of who I am, and I've seen it. I've seen people come out of that darkness. And it takes effort, it takes courage, and you're worth it.
Well, Kevin, thanks so much for just sharing your wisdom and your heart with us. And if you guys want any more information about the books that Kevin mentioned, or the resource of the suicide hotline, if you or know somebody that's struggling, please reach out. That's the best thing to do. And we'll put all that in the show notes. And thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time.